Good morning. My name is Andy Wycislo, agronomist with Waypoint Analytical. Today we're at the BASF Midwest Research Farm, and I'm happy to be joined by agronomist Jeremy Hogan and AJ Woodyard with BASF. And today we're going to discuss some issues and trends and some of the research that they're doing here, looking at plant nutrient levels. So AJ, tell us a little bit about what you do here at the farm and some of the things that you're working on.
Well, welcome, Andy. You're here just outside of Champaign, Illinois at our Midwest Research Farm, where we focus a lot of effort on educational work with growers around agronomic practices that can help enhance their yield in a profitable manner. And so certainly one of the most important ones we've been focused on recently is nutrient management, and we've been using both tissue samples and soil samples to help us better understand that and give growers perspective on what practices might help them raise yield more profitably in both corn and soybeans.
And Jeremy, one of the things we were talking about earlier was you guys are focusing on looking at trends in nutrition. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we have a lot going on here, and in our research project, we're tissue sampling every week, and we're soil sampling every other week, and so we have a lot of data rolling in. And so we found that it's important to not only look at what's going on each week, but also look at the trends throughout the growing season. And we found that there are trends that show up in the tissue test as well as the soil test, and those trends really help us define what we need to focus our objectives on moving forward.
We know that there are some nutrients that can be more of a problem than others. Some micronutrients you can sometimes correct in season with a foliar. Some macronutrients you kind of need to correct in the soil. What do you see nutrient-wise that stands out to you so far?
Well, really, and that's a great question, and it's not often easy to answer, and a lot of it depends on the environment, the soil type, and the geography that we're pulling samples in. But we have found that really three micronutrients that we've been able to influence in our research has been zinc, boron, and manganese. There's some other macronutrients that we've really struggled with, particularly on these higher CEC soils here in the Midwest, and that would be potassium. And we found that we can't put enough potassium on the soil in order to get a reflection in particularly the tissue test. We are seeing a reflection in the soil test. But every nutrient's different, as you know, and we've got to spend time trying to figure out how they impact each other in relation to the pH and the conditions that are there.
Sure. So we get a lot of questions from growers that have not done tissue sampling or maybe very sparingly. You guys talk to a lot of growers across the country. What's kind of your advice to them, getting started in this? How frequently should they sample? You guys are sampling every week, but is that realistic for the grower? Maybe not. What do you advise with them, AJ?
Yeah, it's not always fun to go sample your fields every week.
Yeah.
Most growers probably wouldn't get too excited about that. But you do want to find some starting point, and I think there's a happy medium in between, because just sampling at one point during the season is going to give you a small snapshot into what's really happened in that entire growing year, and that makes it really difficult to make educated and informed decisions. Now, if you're using tissue testing as a tool to go out and diagnose an issue, then that's one thing. So we might go out and diagnose an issue in an area, and then my advice is always to go to another part of the field where you don't see that issue to give you a comparison in that situation. Now, our strategy has been to get a little bit more of a broad scale perspective of what happens through the growing season. That may not need to happen on a weekly basis, but I would advise that as you mature in your tissue sampling on your farm, that you look at maybe sampling once a month or once every couple of weeks in order to build something that you can look at to reflect the trends that happen over years and maybe help you predict what issues you might see on your farm. The other thing that I would mention that's really important as part of this, we became partners with Waypoint because of the services delivered to us, and you want to have those results back to you quickly. And so if you have to wait several days to get your results back, you may not be able to make a decision about a change that needs to be made. We like to get those results back within a 24-hour period, and that way if we see an issue, we can go out and make those adjustments, and Waypoint has allowed us to do that.
Right, because one thing that I often tell people too is that every minute that a nutrient deficiency is present, that's yield loss.
That's right.
Another question I get frequently has to do with sufficiency ranges on plant nutrition levels. Some people wonder if there's different ranges for different growth stages, different ranges for different yield goals. What's your advice to growers on some of that?
So the strategy we take is to try to avoid ever being in a situation where we're deficient. So we don't ever want to see that situation occur because we know we can lose yield. When it comes to maintaining ranges in sufficient, high, very high, those are things that we're trying to better understand. We have seen that some of our strategies of fertilizing at a heavy level have reflected in both of our soil sampling and our tissue sampling. So we have seen the impact in moving certain nutrients from, say, sufficient to into the high range for some portion of the year. Mm-hmm. What we don't have the answer to is whether that maintaining that in a high or very high level is reflected in yields. To date, we haven't necessarily seen that. So our strategy has just been to maintain that in the upper end of the sufficient ranges throughout the growing season as much as possible and avoid any situation where we're deficient.
Very good. Any other advice that you have for growers, especially if they're getting started in a program, or things that they need to watch out for?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say patience, and you need to take the time to do it right. If you're going to be out there testing, as AJ said, you want to go to the right place at the right time and be consistent with what you're doing. And you know, you're not going to find the answer to a lot of these questions overnight. It may take, you know, the entire growing season to start to figure out a trend, or multiple years of trends that we talked about earlier in order to get a result. So be patient and do the right things when it comes to testing, and use a good lab. And we've sent samples off to Waypoint Lab, and we've sent samples off to other labs, and we've found that consistency from a lab standpoint is also very important.
Very good. Well, thank you, Jeremy and AJ, for joining me today, and thanks to the BASF Group and the Midwest Research Farm for having us here and answering some common questions that we hear at Waypoint from growers and agronomists that are doing tissue testing or looking at plant nutrition. So if you have any other questions, you can always contact us at Waypoint, or these guys at BASF, I'm sure would be more than happy to help you as well. So thanks for joining us.